Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan. It's good to be here with you again today. Normally after I do a Bible study, I do something called an Afterverse, which is basically just a discussion of the study that we did. And recently I've done several different Bible studies and haven't done any Afterverses. And that's kind of weighed on my mind a little bit. So I wanted to kind of make one that's well encompasses them all, the recent ones that we have missed an afterverse with, because a lot of things have happened. A lot of things have changed recently. Things in our world have changed. We've had an upheaval. We've had attacks on Christianity. We've had a revival of Christianity. We have some good momentum going in some areas where people are wanting peace. And we've had some areas where people are not wanting peace. And it all kind of seems to be something that is getting exaggerated, growing in one way or the other. And it is causing some discomfort for a great many people on both sides of the spectrum. And so I asked myself, why do I do these videos? Why do I share the things that I share? Because it's not just only for the sanctuary groups themselves, but also a part of my own journey and something that has become important to me. I got to ask myself, why God, right? Why has that become the central focus in my life and in the lives of a great many people around the world, especially when a lot of good and educated and learned people around the world just simply can't accept or grasp a concept of God that is suitable to them in what they see in the world around them, what they can conceive of, what they can understand, and what they can accept. And sure enough, of course, a great many religions and particular individuals have truly caused a lot of damage and harm to the name and word God and the name and word Jesus for a very long time. And I can understand why some people just don't relate and can't find their way down that particular type of path. So for the rest of us that do, it's always a good idea, especially for somebody like myself, to continue asking myself, why? Why do I wish to continually pursue this thing called God? And for the greater understanding of God, given all the things that take place in life and how much life actually encompasses and takes our time, and so many things need to be done, and there are so many facets to life just itself. It is very full all on its own. Why also bring this factor in? Some people think that religion or a spiritual life or a life of peace is a way of weakness, a way of running away, putting some responsibility on some unknown entity somewhere as, that we can hide in, that we can escape in. And sure enough, we see people who actually do. They kind of hide in their religions or in their churches. I call them shiny, happy people. They're always putting on some kind of a mask of tranquility and joy and everything's perfect, and it never seems very authentic. But of course, in those same groups are a great many people where their faith is extremely authentic. And, we we have to differentiate between the two so that we don't get trapped into that kind of false happiness ourselves. But the truth is that trying to follow a spiritual life or trying to follow a religious life is actually a path that takes great courage and great faith. And because there's a lot to it. First of all, we are setting aside our own instincts. We are setting aside our own personal desires and wants. Not that they're wrong, because, wanting to have a family, wanting to have kids, wanting to have a good job, all those things are wonderful. Wanting to be able to make enough money to buy a boat. That's all good stuff and wonderful stuff. But the human instinct on its own can be very destructive, very self-centered, very selfish, very self-focused. And we found limitations to such things. And our answer, of course, was to seek that which is greater than ourselves, something greater than ourselves. And there's a lot of people who don't even believe in a God, who believe in something greater than themselves, whether it be the universe itself, the planet, a principle, like love as a principle. And deep down, it's, something that was said in a great book on this earth. One of the quotes is that deep down inside, everyone, every man and woman and child, is the fundamental idea of God. Whether we agree with it or not, or whether we believe in it or not, we all seem to have this idea of a higher power, of a thing which we call God. And in setting aside our own instincts and our own drives in order to instead first put something other than our self, a principle of service, a principle of love towards others, a principle of seeking the good rather than seeking the bad, the principle of finding the good rather than the bad. And of course, we don't see that always in religious movements and spiritual movements because we find those who are, of course, always attacking what they perceive to be the other side. But the whole pursuit of God itself, and actually original Christianity itself, wasn't meant to have any division amongst anybody, but to instead enlighten people as to the nature of their worth and the nature of eternal life and the nature of the concepts of these things. Matter of fact, there are very educated people who, think that Jesus Christ was the first quantum physicist when he was talking about things like the mustard seed and whatnot, that he actually had a great deal of understanding of how the nature of how existence itself works. And of course, all the principles that he put out there were principles that are not instinctually easy for us to try and adopt on a daily basis. So it's actually quite the opposite, that those who are trying to have a religious life and those who are trying to have a spiritual life, or those who are just seeking a relationship with God, they are willing to examine themselves. And that alone is something that a lot of people, even amongst religions, are just too afraid to do. But we have to examine our fears. We have to examine our angers. We have to examine our behavior and take a look at what things are causing us harm or causing other people harm. And of course, fear in all cases, unless we're just talking about trepidation or things that are natural. But fear, especially overblown fear, all the way up to paranoia, nothing about it ever brings about a greater good. It only distracts us from reality. Even though, if we say, somebody, well, 100% of the time I do this, this ends up happening, and so I'm afraid because it's going to happen again. Well, even in that case, it's only been 100% up until now. Something may change. Like having every relationship fail. But one of the reasons why every relationship fails is because we humans naturally and instinctually always look at the other person. And we may say, well, I've just been a bad picker, I pick bad people. But the reality is if we take a look at ourselves and our parts and things, where did our fear get in the way of that relationship? Where did our demands get in the way of that relationship? Where did our wants and needs that were self-focused or self-centered get in the way of actually having an equal and loving and giving relationship with another human being? Then we may find the ability to have a relationship with somebody that doesn't fail. And that's what trying to live a godly life is all about. There is a great deal of self-examination, not for the standpoint of us shaming ourselves. And of course, we'll see that also in a lot of religions, that They shame people for not being perfect. And that's another tactic that keeps us away from actually the process of self-examination, because we have to then go into denial about our behavior and hide the things going on in our life, because we have to put on this portrayal that we're religious or spiritual people. And of course, we're not at that point. We're liars and fakes. But those of us who have actually been down a very dark road in our life several times, who have actually reached out to God and asked for help, for real, from an authentic place, we have seen that there truly is no other choice but to follow something other than ourselves. Everything about ourselves kept failing. And so we once again take a look at this concept and this idea of God. And for myself, God is just the origin of absolutely everything. Jesus Christ called him a spirit. The Father is a spirit, and we have to meet him in truth and in spirit. So it's not about my flesh discernment and my brain intelligence. It's about connecting to something greater and something higher than I could ever achieve or find on my own. And of course, when I look at the vastness just of our own planet and all the life that is on it, and I look at our galaxy and all the wonders to that, and the mathematics that go behind everything, and I look to the universe itself and how big it is, and we have no idea, how much is in it. I mean, some have suggested that there are entire planets that are completely made of diamond, bigger than our Earth. There's literally no limit at all to possibility, just in the physical world that we can perceive of as human beings. So when we tap into something that is in a higher level, a higher plane, a higher existence, we tap into what produced that life that we see everywhere, in everything. And that's the case. I am here and I am breathing in and out, not because of my own accord. The person you're looking at now, some would say, well, you were the God that made yourself and put yourself in yourself. And even with that idea that some people have, this person here has no awareness of such things. So all I have is the concept of something greater than myself, which we call God. Now, however we want to define that in our own personal lives, it gives us a place to have a beginning, an origin, somewhere to start. And that's good enough. And the good thing is, for me, is that I realize that that's where my life itself comes from. Since I didn't make myself, it wasn't my own energy that put myself together. I'm not even here when I'm sleeping, but yet life still functions in me. My body still functions. It still breathes in and out. My consciousness is turned off, yet life is still happening. And I realize that the core of all living things is that power and is that energy and is that presence and that life that we call God. And for me to refuse to want to connect to the life just inside of myself and get an understanding of what that purpose is and what the meaning of that is, for me, is the greatest type of ignorance that I could possibly do. I would be denying even myself that I'm even alive or I have any value, or that there's a purpose to why I'm here. But we exist. We are here. And I had to take a look at that and decide that this was something I wanted to get to understand and I wanted to know. And so I started making decisions to set aside my own particular wants and my own particular needs and examine them Not that they were bad or worth throwing away, but to start over, to say, okay, I don't know if this principle or this idea that I have has actually been working for me in my life or not. I thought it did, but it brought me great misery. Like having a huge DVD collection. Oh, look at this great! I have 1,300 DVDs of science fiction, and I don't anymore. Nor do they have any value anymore because life changed, right? But I used to have comfort in things and ideas that, if I had more, I'd be happier. And of course, the more I had, the more I was responsible for, and the more I felt tied down, and the more I was bogged down, and all of it was just stuff. Not that having a lot of stuff is bad. There are people who can manage all that really well. But I had missed the whole point that life itself is what's worth collecting. Time with people, conversations, laughter, joy, sharing things with people, giving to other people. These are things that I couldn't actually, in my own intellect, truly see where its value was. I was someone who would argue against other people who I felt were in error of their reasoning. I would debate people. I had a proudness to me. And all of it got me to a place where ultimately all I could see was that all of it failed. It didn't produce peace and serenity and anything lasting. There was nothing lasting. It was all fleeting and grasping at the wind, as Solomon would say, grasping at straws. But trying to start and establish a relationship with God or with our conception of God or with a higher power is not always an easy choice to make, because it actually does take courage. And for people who, it takes bravery. It takes being willing to begin to conceive or trust something that we ourselves can't yet see, touch, taste, feel. Something greater than us, something beyond us. Now, we've all experienced some things in our life that just puts a ton of awe in us, and we were blown away at its power and at its magnitude, whether it was something destructive or whether it was something creative. But to truly turn our reliances off of the things of the world and instead put that reliance on our feeble understanding of this great and vast thing called God is a big step in the life of everyone who does so. I have dear friends who extremely anti-religious, extremely anti-Christian, extremely, they just, and they're no danger to anyone. They're wonderful people, all on their own. But they're so tired of the rhetoric and the condemnation and the judging and the fakeness and the falseness and the image that has been all created in the name of God, and the arguments and the self-righteousness and the arrogance. And I don't blame them for the feelings that they have. Yet, I can talk to them about God. Because they're my friend, they're willing to hear me out, and they know I'm actually wanting to share and hear their ideas and why they came from that place. Because, see, my job isn't to try and convince anybody of anything other than the fact that I care about them. And I accept them as they are, because that's one of the things God has asked of me to do, was to love one another as I love myself. That's one of the things Jesus Christ said to do. It's the second great command. To love life, to acknowledge the life of another, to see them with respect, and with honor and with dignity, no matter where they are or what their beliefs are. And to trust in that, even in the face of those who are against us and against our ideas, requires a power greater than us to dwell within us. And so this decision to trust God and follow the idea of God and to try and believe in a concept of God takes great courage every day. Because even though some people on earth have had vast and massive spiritual awakenings where they experience and they express and feel and something much greater than themselves, and they themselves believe they have touched wisdom, and they know it doesn't come from them. Even they know very little. And so the people that are out there being what they believe to be followers of Christ or Christians that are attacking others, that are approaching with superiority, that are burdening others with rules and regulations of qualification to be a part of a fellowship ormovement to seek God, they aren't actually Christian and they aren't actually godly. Because God wants a relationship with everybody. Indeed, that power of life is in every single person who is alive. Deep down inside everyone is the concept of God and the power of God that has given them life. And if God dwells within them as a living thing, how, and I see the life in them. I see them breathing in and out and walking upon the earth. How can I not instead just be an example of the acceptance and acknowledgement of that, so that anyone who may possibly be interested or desire themselves to develop a relationship with God won't be offended? Because nobody should be offended. How can we be offended by that which is life? Only men can twist that up. Only they can turn it into, you're a sinner and you're not, Only men can do that. The Father, God, didn't want anyone to perish, to be in ignorance, to be spiritually dead. He wanted that spark of life in all of us to awaken to greater and more life. And wherever we are in that journey, even if we can't fathom having any type of, we can't even say the word God, but we have a desire to know what life is, that's a good enough place to start. Because wherever we are is the truth in the first place. And part of living a spiritual and a godly life is to not deny the truth about ourselves. Now, a lot of people want to argue with other people about the truth about them, and they're missing the point. The point is to know the truth about yourself and to go to God in truth and in spirit about ourselves. And God doesn't turn away anyone who seeks after him. Ask anybody who has recovered from things like alcoholism or addiction that did so through pursuing a relationship with God. Every single one of them will say that all they truly needed to do was want it. And as soon as they wanted it, they became willing to try new things, to set aside their old ideas, to trust, to have faith, and all things wakened up in them. God appeared in them. The life in them expanded. simply because they acknowledged a truth about themselves. Because, we can't solve a problem that we're not willing to admit exists. And that's another one of the reasons why I believe we have seen a lot in the world throughout since the beginning of time, where men of authority, men and women of authority or power, create a condition in hoops that you have to jump through. It's to avoid their own selves. They hang on the idea of their authority rather than God's authority. And so those who have spoken those things in the name of God are actually the opposite of God. God wanted all of us to love one another and care for one another. And there are some people who just won't do that. I know some people personally who they just have bitterness and wrath and rage in them. And it literally disgusts them that other people exist. They're so into themselves. And, nothing can be done for that other than to just pray for them that someday they be free of their fear and their anger and their wrath, so that maybe they can awaken, because life is in them too. But like I said, we don't have to convince anybody of anything. Instead, we just get to live it and share our own stories. And that's one of the reasons why the sanctuary exists, is so that groups anywhere can be started by anyone, so that people get together and just start talking about God. That everyone can talk. Even though there may be some leaders, there may be pastors, it's for everyone to participate and to share their life stories and their journey with God, because we all gain from it. The more of us that share about these things, the more we gain an understanding and awaken an understanding greater about God in all of us. And then the more we do that and hear that, the more we see something greater than ourselves, the more we start to comprehend something greater than ourselves, the more we start experiencing things like peace and like a transformation of our own heart, where we don't want to harm anybody, where we're not trying to one-up anybody, we're not trying to be better than anybody. We understand the value of all life itself, and we have moments where we truly experience this. And it's a constant awakening. And so we get up the next morning and we have that choice again. Am I going to follow myself and my own instincts and my own wants and my own desires and my own stuff? Or am I going to trust God with my life? But it's His life that's in me. So the more I actually trust the life that's within me, the more that life guides me to life. Not to condemnation, judgment, arguments, strife, but to creation, building, joining, uniting, accepting, honoring, respecting, automatically. I didn't have to try and prove myself. I just had to be open to allow God's Spirit to awaken in me. And then these expressions of love, these expressions of service, these expressions of desire for others in a positive way, to be a positive influence, just automatically start coming through. And I myself get to experience what integrity feels like. And not needing it to be acknowledged to me, but because it's God who did it. It's God who helped me love another person. It's God's love that loves the other person. It is the spiritual thing, because love is an eternal and spiritual principle. And I get to experience real love and real acceptance of another human being, because God awoken that in me. Life awoken that into me. Whereas left to myself, I couldn't ever perceive it on that level. There was always differentiation between myself and everything else. I saw no united spirit of life. But the spirit of life itself awakens us to the spirit of life itself. And you know, some of those people that I know that I've been close to that they've been so turned off by religion, they've been turned off by Christians. I've been able to get together throughout my life and play music with. And that's the life we share. We played music together and we bond as brothers. And I don't have to convince them of my beliefs and, you know, they need to be converted. Because we are already doing a good thing and joining in something where we're creating and there's love, but I mean, we all love it. And we all feel good. And every good feeling is what comes from God, because every good feeling is life. All the bad feelings are from principles of death. And what this journey with God helps reveal is that the majority of all bad feelings I experience are within me, and I am responsible for them. You know, other people have made me feel bad simply because of my belief, not because of what they actually said or did, but because what I believed it meant, what I agreed it meant. And when I start trusting and looking everywhere for something, this power greater than myself and within, my fears and I start seeing those facts. And now I have a choice. Now it's something I can change in myself. I can start to realize that maybe somebody said something hurtful to me because of their fear, because of their need to defend themselves against their own insecurity. And so instead of thinking someone's attacking me, I start to have the feeling and the understanding that maybe they need love and support and acceptance without qualification. The only qualification is that we're alive. Because it's my understanding that my job here is not to judge the worthiness of another soul. I can judge the worthiness of a principle, whether it's life, whether it's death. And I can look and see the principles of life or death in other people. But it was the Father himself that wanted all to be saved. And that means, for me, my job is to always keep that door open. Not only for myself, but for everyone. And to be a channel of that peace and a channel of that spiritual desire, that life awaken in others. And it's more abundant, not just in the music, not just in the gardening, not just in the sunbathing, but in everything that we do, to be able to attach to the greatness of life that is going on around us. And when the more of us do that, the less arguing and fighting there is all around the world. Why do I pursue God? Because it is the only thing that has ever helped me actually begin to agree with my own self and to believe in my own life, not just others. It's allowed me to look myself in the mirror. It is a great relief when I no longer have to compete with anyone, when I no longer have to be better than anyone, when I no longer have to play the game of the world. It is a huge weight off our shoulders. Yes, we still have to survive. We still have to make money, we still have to pay bills, still have to do all those kind of things. But it is no longer a matter of my self-worth. My self-worth exists because of the life within me that I can now acknowledge and see came from the source of life that I call God. And so whatever it is called in anyone, to realize that thing is in them. That voice that just always knows the right thing to do. That tells us, maybe you should tell her you love her. And you go, oh, I'm not going to do that. She upset me today. Because we're just trusting our feelings and ourselves instead of that little voice that says, hey, why don't you make peace in your relationship? All we have to do is start agreeing with the life within us and the life within others. And compassion and understanding and acceptance and respect automatically follow, and they continue to follow in greater and greater quantities. It's a lifelong journey. To me, it's the greatest mystery ever. It's the greatest science fiction story ever. And it will never, ever stop revealing more about something that, to myself, I could have never perceived of in the first place. Because it requires stepping outside of self to truly even be aware it exists. No matter how much we intellectualize and conceptualize the words, we don't actually experience it until we enter into it. I can describe a whole room to somebody. I can describe this entire house to somebody. And they standing at, the intelligence committees of the world. They'll have all sorts of opinions about it. But they will never know what it feels like. And they'll never experience it unless they enter into this house and experience it themselves. God will never, in life, will never lead us into darkness or death. Its whole purpose is life. It's why we have life. It is worth entering into that room within us where life resides and experiencing that and stepping outside of ourselves to do so. And the reason why I continue to do it on a daily basis is even though it was scary in the beginning, and even though even now I have to practice faith in it, and a greater belief and a greater understanding, all the things that have been shown to me are all the wonderful things in life that have inspired me and awed me and humbled me and brought peace and joy and comprehension to me on a scale I could have never imagined in every single living being is worthy of having that experience because God's life is in them. So, we don't need an actual church. We may want one, but it's not necessary. Life is already in us. All we have to do is call out to whatever we think is the highest power, whatever we think is the origin, whatever we think is the life within us, and say, please teach me about you. That which gave me life, teach me about you. And God will teach you about him. And you yourself will agree with everything that God actually reveals about himself to you. We don't have to listen to men. We listen to God. And when we listen to God, we start hearing the men who are talking about God, and we hear the men who are not talking about God, though they say they are. And the difference in that is no longer scary or frightening or anything we even need to attack or argue over. We just continually follow more life. We don't keep trying to make a thing work in our garden that kills the plants. We just go with the things that give more life to the plants and greater fruit. We pursue life. And so too do we do that with God. And that is why God is the central focus of my life. I love you all. Thank you for allowing me to share this afterverse of many afterverses with all of you.